Check, check, check. Oh, yeah. So I guess that's the difference.
Could I have your attention, please? We'd like to get started, so please grab one last glass of punch or coffee and make yourself comfortable. Good morning. Welcome to a true groundbreaking ceremony. We are embarked now on the first of its kind in the world, so I want to thank all of you for being here. My name is Chuck Forrester, and I am the co-chair of the Gay and Lesbian fundraising aspect of the new main library. And this is my co-chair, Diane Benjamin. We thought we'd do this kind of the way you do an Academy Award presentation with the co-presenters. And so one of us is Gina Davis, and the other is Kevin Klein, and you have to figure out which is which. I'd like to start with some thanks for the people who made all of this possible. First of all, Lee Nichols, who did all the press work to make this a truly professional operation. I'd like to thank Gary Gilo, who made the party come together in a wonderful way. Gary. And I'd like to introduce and also thank profusely Sherry Thomas. Sherry is really the spirit behind all of this. It was her energy, it was her vision, and it's her ongoing dedication to this work that has made it possible for all of us to be here today. Sherry started off just kind of as a volunteer, then we got her hired to support us in the gay and lesbian effort, and she's done such a good job that the Library Foundation has hired her full-time to take care of the larger special gifts part of the fundraising. So she's got. I'd also like to thank the Portico Cafe, who've made this wonderful space and food available to us. Chip Connolly's the owner. Gary Cook is the manager of the restaurant who's helped put this all together. And Cynthia Blowbaum is the chef. Thank you very much. This is wonderful. And I hope all of you will come back here for lunch afterwards. I'd like to start by just telling you a little bit about why I'm here today. I started off in San Francisco about 21 years ago, and I was working at the time in the city planning building, which is the building that was recently demolished for the new library. And I was here with my wife and my new child and trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing, and I ended up wandering into the main library. And after looking on a couple of shelves, the book City of Night somehow appeared before me. I really have no idea how I got to it or it got to me, but it was just what I needed. It, in somewhat lurid detail, it described the life of gay men who accepted who they were and were proud of who they were and lived a life that I thought maybe I could venture into. And it was for me an important turning point. So the library and me and being gay are intertwined, and so when the opportunity came to help raise some money for this thing, I thought, what a good thing to do. As I said, today is truly a historic moment. We are breaking ground for the first time in history when a public building is devoting part of its space and part of its collection to the literature, the culture, and the history of the gay and lesbian movement. Never before has this occurred in a public institution. There have been libraries in the past, and they have met uncertain fates. I learned this morning that one of the early popes destroyed all of the writings of probably the world's greatest poet, Sappho. That destroyed. We have now a few remnants left of all of her work. As you know, the Magnus Hirschfeld collection was the subject of the first book burning by the Nazis in Berlin. And that photograph you've probably seen of the book burning with the stormtroopers throwing books on, that was the Hirschfeld collection that was being burned. None of that remains. So today we are starting to do what the world has tried to do before, and which we're convinced we can do and make permanent. So I'm very pleased to be a part of that. I'd like to introduce one person who has broken ground for our community in many ways, and that's Steve Coulter. Steve is the first member of our community to serve as president of the Library Commission. He's the area vice president for Pacific Bell and a member of the board of the Gay and Lesbian Historical Society. And because of Steve, the question of whether or not there would be a Gay and Lesbian Center in the new library has never been in doubt. It was there at the beginning. We'll see it through. And it's our thanks to Steve for doing it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. When the bond issue passed in 1988 to build the new main library, basically the new library commissioners, I think there were 4 or 5 of us appointed just a couple of months before that, saw the building as something more than just a single building. It was an opportunity to really recreate the entire library system. And we started thinking about how we would do that, and part of our plan was really to reach out to certain communities in new ways to bring in new constituencies into the library. Sort of some typecasting. The library assigned the Eureka Valley Harvey Milk branch as one of my branch libraries to get to know. And I was quite taken that we had a collection like that, but I was also deeply disappointed to see tens of thousands of newsletters and documents and books sitting in boxes on top of shelves, rather difficult to find things. And was told by the branch librarian about the thousands of books that gay men and lesbians were donating to the library every year, and there was really nothing to do with them. Well, what are we going to do with that? So I was taken with that. Some months later, I happened to be in New York, and it was my practice whenever I was traveling on business to try to meet with city librarians. So I met with the city librarian of New York and some of his staff. We talked about fundraising and stuff, and I was quite taken with the Schomburg Center for Black Culture in New York, which has its own building in Harlem and is really rather remarkable in terms of an international resource for black history and culture, which has some remarkable collections, multimedia collections. And I started thinking about, this makes some sense to me. We should be doing something along these lines within San Francisco Public, and I think I know just the community where something like this might work. So Roberto Estevez and I met with the advisory committee to the Eureka Valley Harvey Milk branch, and we talked about the idea. And some interesting people were in that group, like Bill Walker, one of the co-founders of the Gay Lesbian Historical Society, and that's where I met Sherry Thomas, and a dialogue started that gradually started bringing in more and more people. And there was, endless enthusiasm. People like Jim Hass, who's been active in the library community for a decade, who's really one of our great hidden resources for the library that we celebrate today, but also was quite taken with this. People like Kathy Page, who is the project director for the building of the new main, and is actually the person that designated the room that we're going to use. She's the one who used her power to sit down and say, aha, this is going to be our space. Is that a correct statement on something like that? But we really saw this as an opportunity. If we did not seize it now, in our lifetimes, it would never happen again. Because how often do you really build a new main library? Not very often. The one that we are in currently was built and opened in 1917. And we're looking at this being our main library for at least a century or more. That's certainly the hope. So if we wanted to do something in it that was really unique, we had to figure out what we were doing. It took quite a sales job to really, I think, convince a lot of the library staff that we should rethink the way we provide library service. Fortunately, though, the city librarian, Ken Dowland, is a guy that is used to stretching the parameters of what most people think about as library service, and so we started redefining a number of the collections, and this one really became one of those that became very, very popular within the library. There are more than a handful of gays and lesbians within the library, which probably surprises a lot of people. So there was a lot of institutional support once the thing started moving. And really, the more we talked to people, the more excited they got, and of course, we are here today celebrating this. History is very important to the gay and lesbian community. We have been denied our history for a long, long time, and what we are about today in the groundbreaking is historic. It completes the 1912 master plan. I thought I would share something with you. It's this weird thing that I've been hauling around that people have been asking about. On April 5th, 1913, Mayor Sonny Jim Rolfe took this shovel and broke ground on Civic Center. 80 years later, we are going to be using this shovel again. I'm going to hand it to Mayor Jordan in an hour or so, and allow him to have the honor, basically, of completing the dream. We are part of that dream, because the Gay and Lesbian Center is going to have dedicated space in this building, and it's going to be there for many generations to come. So we are part of history, and I think this is really an extraordinary opportunity for our community. We see this center over time, just like the Schaumburg, which took 60 years to reach where it's at today, really becoming an international center. Quite unique, and providing all sorts of outreach, just like Schaumburg does, exhibits, holding conferences, publishing, commissioning white papers, reaching out to the community. If gays and lesbians want to be mainstreamed and recognized, what could be more significant than being a part of what is probably the greatest piece of Americana in America, the public library system? And we're going to be part of that starting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think all of you can feel the excitement in the room, and we have some exciting people here today. Some already been identified. I want to identify just a few others. Jean Harris is here from the mayor's office, and Supervisor Carol Migden is with us. There's Ruth Brinker, who started Open Hand, is here. Jeff Escoffier, the publisher of Outlook magazine. And I mean, just every one of you here is, I think, is exciting by the fact that you are here, and that we're on the groundbreaking day, and we are breaking ground for something, not only for the new library, but something that's never existed before, and it is going to start now. Two of the very special people that we have here today are very integral to what's happening at the new library, and I think one of the things that gives us the most inspiration and incentive to go out and raise the money we need to complete the collection. And I've got my own personal little story here. While Chuck was learning to live city nights, about the same time I moved here and was just coming out. And I took a class in lesbian literature out at San Francisco State. And some of the books were totally unavailable, but that were important books during the history of lesbian literature. And the only copies we had were Xerox copies, I mean, like this thick, of paperback novels and different books, and they were from Barbara Greer's collection. And Barbara came and, in fact, taught one of the classes. This was a good 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago. And I met her for the first time and always heard about her as this person who had amassed this incredible collection of gay and lesbian literature and lived somewhere out in the Midwest. Well, now Barbara and her partner Donna McBride live in Tallahassee and own two houses, one in which they live and work and the other which houses this collection. The collection is, Barbara's been collecting over 40 years now. I forget, Barbara, you can fill in the details, but how many titles are in this collection? Both gay men and lesbian literature, periodicals, the latter, everything dating back, copies of everything, plus boxes and boxes of correspondence with different authors throughout time, current authors, past authors, etc. It's just a treasure trove. And we're pleased to announce that Barbara and Donna are generously giving this collection to the new Gay and Lesbian Center, and it's truly going to be a cornerstone for the whole collection. I mean, if we had to go out and find these books individually, it would be almost impossible. I'm sure some of them are the only ones of their kind. So, and Barbara told me this morning, told Chuck and I this morning, that she started out as a book reader when she was about 16 or so, probably before that. It's not that she learned to read at 16, but started seriously reading and collecting at that time. And that grew into editing books, reviewing books, collecting books, and becoming a book publisher as Naiad Press. And I think from that, being a bookworm has amassed a collection that basically glows in the dark. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Barbara Greer and Donna McBride. Barbara Greer talks. Donna McBride stands in the audience. I had no way of knowing when I knew that I'd be addressing you this morning that it would be such a gay positive audience. So probably some of the things I have to say will be humorous to those of you who already know them. When I was 12 years old, I realized that I was very much in love with my best friend. I got on the Woodward Avenue streetcar and went to the Detroit Public Library. I wish that I could tell you the look on the face of the librarian that I asked to help me, but that is something that I forgot to, that's a document I forgot to save. Anyway, I did find out at the end of several hours that I was that multisyllabic and wonderful word, homosexual. I went home on that same streetcar and told my best friend, my mother, that I was a homosexual. And she said, well, because you're 12 and a woman, a girl, you're too young to make the decision like that, and if you are, you're actually a lesbian. She said that we should wait at least 6 months to tell the newspapers. As it happened, I did, but not a whole lot longer than that. She did, because we were a literate and reading family. In the days when there were no television sets, everyone read. And she told me about 2 books. The first was one she could remember by author and title because it had caused a lot of stir in the community at large, not just in reading circles. And that was The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. She also described a book to me only by plot, as real readers do. They don't remember things like authors and titles and publishers. They remember the cover of the book's color. Librarians here will know about that. And they remember where they found it in the stacks, and but that's about it, and the plot. But she told me about a famous opera singer who'd had a lifetime companion who loved her very dearly. Years later, I learned it was the 1936 Scribner's publication of Lena Geyer by Marcia Davenport, whose other fame, who was actually Alma Gluck's daughter, and Marcia was writing about her mother's life, and Alma Gluck also had Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., for those of you who remember early television. But anyway, this beginning, learning of these books, started me on the I Want to Find Out by Myself course. And I began to find books that reflected my life as a lesbian. And I began to realize that it was going to be something I would have to do all of my life. And when I was a little older, from this city, I learned of the magazine The Ladder, published here in San Francisco by the Daughters of Bilitis, and I began working for it, writing reviews for it, and increasing this collection.
After 16 years, that magazine stopped being published. I had by that time become its editor and publisher. And after I began living with Donna McBride, we founded with 2 other women Naiad Press and began to be a publisher of lesbian material. But all along, for all these years, from age 16, I'm now 58, for 42 years I've collected lesbian and gay literature. I always knew that the books were very important. I learned from women like Jeanette Foster, who wrote Sex Variant Women in Literature, that they were important forever and that they were not going to be kept by people other than gay and lesbian people, so that it was our responsibility to do that if we were not to lose ourselves over again. So it's incredibly exciting and wonderful for us that a public institution, public library, I must step back and say that I have lived now 40 years of my life with librarians. For 20 years, I lived with a librarian that I found in the Literature and Popular Library Department of the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library. 20 years later, I went back to the same department in the same library and found Donna McBride. Shortly after that, Donna became in charge of that particular department and abolished it. That's not entirely true, but it'll do. What I was thinking about when I realized actually how important it is for the books now to be in a very, very public place where they can never be hidden again, never be burnt, never be destroyed, always be available, so that there won't be any more 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old lesbians and gay men looking for themselves and not able to find themselves. It's a natural outgrowth of my life. I've always believed in bringing books to the people and people to the books. In this extremely enlightened city, where many of the problems of race, ethnicity, religion, culture, sexual identification have been being addressed earnestly. I noticed in the introduction that one of the men just speaking is an executive with Pacific Bell, and I think back to 30 and 35 years ago when gay and lesbian organizations in this city were actually fighting with Pacific Bell to get words like gay and lesbian and homosexual into the telephone book. It's wonderful how far things have come, how much things have changed. But when I thought about this enlightened city, I realized that in this enlightened city, that the language used now is very careful of things like gender and identification, so that we no longer use the English language as it was used when the words I'm about to read were written. The man, Clarence Day Jr., who wrote these words, died 2 years after I was born. He died in 1935. And what this quotation is from the story of Yale University Press, but what is more important is that it is a photocopy of a plaque that is on the wall in the main office at Naiad Press and that I've had in my personal library or in my hands for 35, 40 years. I can't remember when I first got it, but it was in connection with a handout from a press at a display at a national convention of the American Library Association. So the snake really does continue to roll down the same path. You will forgive the sexist language, I know. The world of books is the most remarkable creation of man. Nothing else that he builds ever lasts. Monuments fall, nations perish, civilizations grow old and die out. After an era of darkness, new races build others. But in the world of books are volumes that live on, still as young and fresh as the day they were written, still telling men's hearts of the hearts of men, centuries dead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, not only for your collection, but for the love and the vision that you bring to San Francisco. We cherish it. I'd like to make another introduction. When voters approved the bond to build the new library, we knew that the money would be used for the structure. Everything else had to be paid for with private money. Money raised from individuals and businesses concerned enough to give the people who understand what importance a library is and how important it is to preserve our history. We turned to Jim Hormel. All of us know Jim for his leadership and philanthropy in our community. Jim responded enthusiastically, and it is my honor today to tell you that he has made a contribution of $500,000 to this effort. Excuse me. My research tells me that this is the largest gift ever made to a lesbian and gay group. And it is with great pride and honor that I introduce Jim Hormel.
I'm very nervous this morning, and I don't think it's because of you all. I think it's because of the money. I took copious notes on thoughts and ideas that I had about this occasion, and I'm going to stay pretty close to them so that we don't get too delayed here. I want to begin by telling you briefly a little of my story, because I think that it's a story which many of you can identify, a story with which many of you can relate. It's a story of a boy growing up in a small Midwestern town. It's a story of a boy who realized that there was something different about him and didn't quite know how to identify it until adolescence, and at that time there were no resources, no models, no individuals, no collections, no support groups of any kind to turn to. And that little boy and that adolescent went on to high school and college and law school, and in that entire process did not discover the resources that would enable him to reach the kind of identity of self that that would have allowed him to progress in a way that the rest of people growing up in society are allowed to progress. As an adolescent, he read Plato's Symposium. And that particular version of Plato's Symposium in the 1950s was edited to be gender neutral. So there was no way to know that this was about a group of men talking about love among men. It just seems so absurd now when I look back on it. I did discover much later in my life, quite by accident, that in the community where I grew up, there was a gay underground in the 1940s. And it operated a little bit like the Algonquin Round Table, with people getting together, except they got together very surreptitiously. They left wives and husbands behind. They were all married. They all had families. They all lived a completely double life in this rural center in Minnesota. They included the principal of a grade school that I attended, and they included the lesbian publisher of the local newspaper. These were people who were so highly regarded in the community that today monuments and parks are named after them, and I don't believe that the people of the community yet know what they've done. But I know, and I love it. In retrospect, reflecting on the pain and the anguish generated by ignorance and fear, it's clear that the traditional and continued mistreatments of lesbians and gay men, both in history and in present-day society, is outrageous and must not be condoned. History pretends that lesbians and gay men do not exist. And society pretends that we exist separately, that we come from another world, that we violate public morality and have no right to protection either by the state or by the social structure. The double standards are patently clear in every aspect of everyday life. And I give you as examples of the relentless heterosexuality in which we live, TV commercials, the marriage laws, unspoken rules about public displays of affection, media coverage. For example, how many people read about the gay games of 1990, which happened to be the largest single sports event in the world for that year? I dare say not many people read about it, unless they read certain articles in the gay press. How many people were aware that about 650,000 people in 1987 marched on Washington, D.C.? The media did a wonderful job of playing that one down. And another example of all of this is how lesbians and gay men are treated in the entertainment industry. This is something which is topical today. It should have been topical many years ago. I hope that it won't be topical very long. Ignorance and fear drive us to irrational and destructive behavior. We must not tolerate such behavior toward us or anyone else in our universe. We live in a society which often is hostile and uncivil, and we must accept responsibility and put an end to the trampling of individual rights and human dignity. I get very angry about this. I brought with me an example of something which stirs my anger. This is from last Sunday's New York Times. The headline is, "Stung by Child Pornography Inquiry, Farmer Finds Vindication Bittersweet." And it's about Keith Jacobson from Newman Grove, Nebraska, who after years and years of receiving solicitations for subscription to material, responded to one of those subscriptions only to find the authorities in his home when he came back from the mail from his post office that day. His life has been made totally miserable because of a very cheap sting operation, and the result of that operation, which included, I think, 56 other individuals, has generated 4 suicides and has ruined lives of probably most of those individuals. And for what? Sorry about that. I need to express my anger, and I hope that all of you can absorb it and maybe convert it with me into something constructive. By creating the Lesbian and Gay Archive and Resource Center, we're taking a dramatic step, a significant step, into a new era. This will be a facility where we can rediscover ourselves, rediscover our humanity, and where the myths about us can be put to rest. Here we will be able to restore our places in history and society, and our community can receive the recognition it deserves and truly take its place in the community at large. We are extremely fortunate to receive for this center the extraordinary presentation of Barbara Greer and Donna McBride. This remarkable collection was sought by several educational institutions, and I'm just delighted that it's here. For us to receive it is a measure of the importance of this center. With this collection and other valuable contributions of manuscripts, film, and video, we already have the foundation for the primary lesbian and gay studies center. This is the beginning of a beautiful dream come true. Now it's up to all of us to assist in its completion. Each of us has something to contribute: our talents, our skills, our time, our energy, our money. Some of us have all, some of us have some. All of us have something that we can bring to this project. And this project is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to build with permanency a collection that will make clear to the universe that we are in that universe, that we are of that universe. I look forward to all of you being a part of this project. This center is our center, and the library is our library. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, we need to move in a few minutes over to the site for the groundbreaking, but I do want to recognize the members of the committee, the small group who's so far been working with Diane and me to put this together. They're the people with the funny badges that say that it's our library. We want soon for all of you to have one of these buttons saying that it's your library, because it will be your library. What's important is what Jim has just said. It's time for all of us to pitch in and do what we can. We have set a goal of $1.6 million to furnish the Gay and Lesbian Center, to build the collection, to make the library the kind of place we want to do. We're hoping we can do better than that and also build an endowment so that the library continues on into history. The number, as of today, raised primarily by Jim's gift and members of the committee, and a few of you who are here today, is $670,244. We are well on our way. We have a 3-year program that will last 100 years. All of you can play an important part, talking about the library, soliciting your friends, and helping us raise the money, bring the other pieces together that will make this the outstanding collection in the United States. The fundraising we're doing is on a personal basis. I'm not asking anybody to take out a checkbook today and write a check. I want you to all think about it. Every member of the committee so far has made a stretch gift. Each of our gifts is bigger than anything we've ever done before. So we want that to be a theme that goes throughout the community. We are building a center for all of San Francisco, for every lesbian and gay man who will ever come to San Francisco, who will ever sit at a terminal at some university someplace else and need to tap into the incredible resources that we will have here. So we are on our way. Please help us. Thank you for being here. Diane.
That's absolutely what we have to say, and I just want to say on a personal level that and I think all of us feel this way, that throughout history, different cultures have carried their stories on from generation to generation and passed the lessons that they've learned on. And I think that that's what we're doing here. We're preserving our past, we're preserving our present, and building for the future. And we are the storytellers, and the library is going to be the repository of all that culture, and a memorial to those who've gone before us, and to recognize their gifts, and a legacy to all those who are going to come. And I think, and it has been my experience anyway, a joy to all of us who are involved in making this possible. And I just want to show you what, you've seen these buttons with our names on it, but we have blank ones. And it's Blank's Library, and I'd like to see all of your names filled in on this at some point, and I think you would too. So the groundbreaking's happening now over on Grove and Fulton, so you're all invited there. There's more food left, and also this is a great place to come back for lunch afterwards, and thank you for all coming. Okay, Kevin. You were Kevin.
Chosen to have it on my birthday. Thank you.